let you know. Hang on one second. Hang on. I'm almost ready. This is going to be a good one, Brian. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Holly Television Studios, right here in my beautiful garden home state of Nazi, New Jersey. I am your hostess with the mostest, Holly Baglio, and I have the huge, honored, humbled pleasure of getting to speak to Bryan too this evening. You have no idea how much I have wanted this to happen, and I've wanted to highlight Bryan and his testimony and his work. And this is a huge honor. Bryan, thank you so much for being here. You have no idea what a huge honor, and just thank you, thank you, thank you. You, Bryan, sent me an email, and I actually want to give the reins of this broadcast to you, and I want you to lead us in the direction where you want to take this. I know you sent me an email, and you'd like me to read it line by line, and we can go through it. Are you still up for that?
Hi, Holly. It's Bryan. Yeah, we'll go off the outline that we talked about before the call began. If you'll just read each paragraph and then stop at the end of the paragraph, I'll explain what's happening.
Okay, the title of this is Gaslighting and Organized Stalking Tactics Used Against Mind Control Victims Range from Violent to Deadly. Used to discredit victims by a false narrative which leads another person or a group of people to doubt their own perceptions to the extent that they become disoriented and distressed. This dynamic is generally only possible when the target is vulnerable, such as in unequal power relationships, or when the target is fearful of the losses associated with challenging false narratives.
Right. So everything they're doing to their victims, everything they're doing is based on, it's just a game. It's nothing but a game of deception and manipulation, based on various models, I should say, of deception and manipulation. And once you understand that in order for their technology to work properly, the targeted individual and mind control victim must play the game, must continually respond, in other words, then you can begin to understand how to counter the technology that they're using and begin to defeat the technology, or at least prevent them from developing your responses. If you can begin to work through the remote neural memory blocks and counter the system's ability to influence your choices, because that's what they're doing. They're using mental suggestions, the supercomputers using mental suggestions constantly to predict and influence, to manipulate, using deception and manipulation, your choice references, your previous choices, using them against you to influence your future activity. So that's paramount. People understand that. So when it says false narrative, what I mean is, whatever it is the victim will respond to. Okay, whatever it is the targeted individual will respond to. Now, there are certain things people are not very interested in. They find out what it is. They map out using influence mapping. It's called influence mapping and negative associative conditioning.
Hang on one second, Bryan. I don't mean to be rude. Can you speak directly into your speaker? Because it kind of sounds like you're muffled right now, and I don't want to lose you.
Okay, so they're creating a false narrative to deceive and manipulate people, because their technology depends upon deception and manipulation. Okay, so it's a game from start to finish. It's a game of deception and manipulation, nothing more. That's mind control. That's trauma-based mind control technologies of the CIA and the Department of Defense are dependent upon forcing the victim, the target to play the game constantly every day, meaning to force the victim to respond to their provocations, to their street theater, to their situational and conversational scenarios in order to use physical and psychological trauma to map out and reverse engineer the sensory and neural pathways of the victim's brain and central nervous system. What they're doing, the supercomputer is using various software programs to build inside of its database a specific cognitive model of the victim's brain and central nervous system to eventually achieve direct behavioral control over you. So that false narrative is nothing but a game of deception and manipulation. That's what I mean. Used to discredit victims by a false narrative, which leads another person or group of people to doubt their own perceptions, to doubt your memory, to doubt your own emotions, to the extent they become disoriented and distressed. In other words, you can't tell the real from the artificial anymore.
It's hard to hear you. It's hard to hear you. I'm sorry, Bryan, but just...
Yeah, let me
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't know. I figured that this would happen, but
I don't want to have you put the phone close to your head because I know about the waves, but just try to get close to that speaker. I apologize. I don't mean to be rude to you.
No, it's okay. We'll just start the recording as soon as we have good audio. We'll start the interview as soon as we have good audio. We'll start it.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, take your time. It was good there for a second, but then it kind of went out again and it sounded muffled.
Well, that's going to happen. I'm remembering they're constantly creating chaos and trauma. Chaos and trauma is how their technology works. Hold on.
Sure, take your time. I'm just glad to finally speak to you after all these years. Especially to find out, the whole part of them mapping our minds. Just, you understand the technology where I don't. Where you know how they target me and us, all of us. I'm still learning that. It took me a lot of years listening to you, Bryan, to get it to sink in and register what the technology that you were trying to explain. So.
Yeah. Well, I'm not getting. Hold on just a second. It says that I'm connected, but I just don't know. Yeah, I'm connected to the wrong device. Hold on just a second.
Okay. Sorry to drive you nuts, but just I find so much value in everything you say. I don't want to miss a letter that you speak. Forgive me.
So you live in New Jersey, huh?
Yes. Nazi New Jersey.
Yeah. Okay, can you hear me better now?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, great.
Perfect. Wow.
Okay.
Big difference. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll just go up the outline that we just read. Used to discredit victims by a false narrative. They need to discredit you. So part of what they're doing is they need to discredit the victim, so they engage in various models of deception and manipulation. And by models of deception and manipulation, I mean models like OCCAM RAZOR Principle, hyper game theory, etc., etc. Okay, these models of deception and manipulation are constantly used against the victim every day to discredit the victim, while simultaneously they're able to constantly provoke the targeted individual, provoking the victim into emotional response after emotional response. because the supercomputer your brain is remotely tied to for life, okay, by way of a remotely tied to for life by way of a bidirectional stream of energy, electromagnetic low frequency waves specifically tuned to the victim's brainwave signature, okay, that stream of energy is constantly downloading all of your responses at speed of light. Energy travels at speed of light. So these exascale supercomputers are capable of billions of calculations per second, not millions, billions. And what they're able to do is they're able to download all the responses of the victim, the synaptic responses. The system is downloading all of your brain waves for whole brain emulation, to break your brain down to the synaptic level, to create inside of its database using various software a cognitive model. When I say cognitive model, I mean a copycat, parallel, twin personality of you, of your will, intellect, and emotion, your human soul. They're targeting the human soul. People don't realize how serious this is. Okay, that's what I mean when I talk about a false narrative. Okay, so mankind, man, woman is essentially a triune being made up of body, soul, and spirit. So in simple terminology, the body would be the five senses, such as sight, touch, taste, hearing, smell. The soul is the will, intellect, and emotion, and the spirit is the conscience. Well, that's what they're targeting. They're targeting the human soul, the will, intellect, and emotion, okay, with this technology. For training, research, and development. People ask why. Why are people being tortured and murdered and targeted and harassed every day? For training, research, and development, for one reason, for artificial superintelligence technologies, and specifically the continued, this is very important, the continued refinement of artificial superintelligence. You know, the government in the world who is first able to fully implement and deploy this artificial superintelligence technology will have an incomparable advantage over every other government on Earth. So everything's run by artificial superintelligence now. It's not artificial intelligence. It's artificial superintelligence. Artificial intelligence is based off of mathematical algorithms, if and then algorithms, okay? They gave up on artificial intelligence. They abandoned the math decades ago. And then they moved toward a new artificial superintelligence regime based on a reverse engineering of the human mind. And the problem is they have to continually refine that technology, because the government whose artificial intelligence is slightly weaker will lose every battle, will lose every conflict, will lose everything's run by artificial intelligence now, artificial superintelligence. So they must continually refine the technology. They must continually upgrade it, continue the training, research, and development nonstop from and that's what they're doing. They're having to continue to add victims. They're continuing to add people. They're also building a human grid. They're building a human grid where the technology can you hear me?
Yes, I'm sorry. I can. You're perfect. I'm sorry.
Where the technology, they're building a human grid, connecting people into hive mind groups, where the technology can eventually be scaled up to include all 350 million Americans. So they're targeting the human soul. They're targeting your human soul, your will, intellect, and emotion. People don't understand that the human soul is physical. It's not just spiritual. It's not just metaphysical. The spirit, the conscience, is totally metaphysical. Okay, it cannot be replicated and duplicated because it's metaphysical. It's not physical. Not the soul. The human soul is both physical and spiritual. It's both, the soul of man is both physical and metaphysical. Okay? Yeah, the soul has metaphysical qualities, spiritual qualities, or it could not survive in heaven or hell. But the human soul is also physical. People don't understand this. The human soul is intrinsically tied into the neuronal circuitry of the human brain. It's your personality. It's who you are when you're alone and no one else is watching but God. That's the human soul. And because it's physical, will, intellect, and emotion, Because it's physical, it can be replicated and duplicated. And that's what they're doing with this technology. The training, research, and development includes the duplication, the replication of the human soul, the cognitive model of the victim's will, intellect, and emotion inside their database. A copycat parallel twin personality of your soul. That's what's happening.
This is a lot to ingest. Yes. Okay. The next paragraph. Brian, I hope you don't mind. I put your email to me in the description box of this video so people can read it, ingest it, and keep up with us, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, no, don't take my email out of there. I don't want these people. They'll just email me to death. Yeah,
oh, no, I didn't put your email up. I just... I'm reading, what you have me reading. Oh, no, I didn't give out any of your details. Absolutely not.
So the next paragraph says organized stalking and gaslighting. Go ahead.
I can read that. Okay. That's all that I showed them is what I'm reading. Organized stalking and gaslighting tactics are how government contractors constantly discredit and set up and entrap their victims to neutralize activists, dissidents, and whistleblowers, or anyone they consider a threat, while simultaneously provoking their victims into emotional responses which can be remotely measured and integrated back into RNM data.
Right. So that's what they're using. Without organized stalking and these other scripted mind games like gaslighting, etc., there's no way for them to measure and gauge, to fully measure and gauge whether their technology is working properly or not. They simply can't tell whether the victim, the targeted individual's responses are consistent. And so before the system can integrate your responses, the synaptic responses, your brainwaves back into its database to build a cognitive model of your brain, a copycat parallel twin personality of your will, intellect, and emotion, before it can do that, it has to verify those responses are consistent. That's what I mean by remotely measured emotional responses, synaptic responses, brainwaves, okay? The system captures the memory, but it also captures the associated impulse, okay, those brainwaves, and it downloads them back into its system. But it can only integrate that information back into RNN data, remote neural monitoring, remote neural manipulation data, once and only if it is able to verify those responses are consistent. Okay? So they're using organized stalking and gaslighting to set up, not just to discredit, but to set up and entrap their victims. And oftentimes, activists and whistleblowers and other people they consider a threat will be caught up in this. That's just part of the game, unfortunately. They have to discredit people. And they have 4 methods of dealing with people that are considered activists, dissidents, or whistleblowers. And a dissident is basically anybody they don't like, okay? An activist is a person or a group of people who basically, they act off the facts that they possess, the data that they possess, whereas a whistleblower will have hard data, a recording or something. A dissident is just anybody they don't like, so you become a nuisance. You piss off the wrong person. Okay, that's a dissident. Okay, so there's some very important, when you say activists, dissidents, and whistleblowers, people understand that could include all 350 million Americans, because anybody can fall into the category of dissident. Okay, so that's what's happening. They're just taking people and they're placing them into these the training, research, and development, into these programs for that purpose, to neutralize them. To remove them from society. And people who take a stand against this technology, that's what happens. They're set up and entrapped. If killing the victim is not the preferable option, then and most victims do die from the trauma to their internal organs. Eventually they just die a premature death. But the point is, if killing the victim right away is not the preferable option, then what they'll do is they'll set up and entrap the victim, the targeted individual, and have that person thrown into prison or a mental institution, or they'll just mind hobble them. They'll just hit their brain with a pulse of energy, and they'll just turn
or turn them into a human vegetable. I'm getting a lot of background noise. So in any event, that's what's happening. Okay, they're using the technology not just on innocent people who are chosen for training, research, and development, but these targeted individuals can fall into any. There are basically four categories of targeted individuals. The first category of people want to know why was I targeted? Well, you were targeted because you fell into one of those four categories. And the first category of all targeted individuals, which all targeted individuals fall into, is I'm getting a lot of background noise. If you could just stop the movement on the table or whatever it is.
I'm sorry.
Just stop move. I'm getting a lot of background noise, and it's gonna disrupt the continuity of thought of those who are listening.
I apologize. That's my fault.
No, it's not for my benefit. It's for theirs.
You're
right.
If you're
just trying to minimize the noise.
I'm sorry.
So the first category that all targeted individuals fall into is what are called judicial targets, and those are people who committed a crime or who they suspect may have committed a crime. The second is extrajudicial targets, and that ranges from people they suspect have committed a crime all the way to the other end of the spectrum, where activists, dissidents, whistleblowers. Those would be extrajudicial targets. The third category is targets of opportunity, and basically anyone can fall into that category. People, for example, who are chosen for training, research, and development, just innocent housewives, children. They would be called targets of opportunity. And then the fourth category of all targeted individuals is lucrative targets. And basically that would be someone like a politician or a professor or someone, a diplomat, etc., who may possess information or have access to specific people who do. So, you're targeted. You became a targeted individual because you fell into one of those four categories: judicial target, extrajudicial target, target of opportunity, or lucrative target. And that's the people they're targeting with this technology. Go ahead and read the next paragraph.
Yes. Government contractors rely on a global paradigm to keep their army of informants, provocateurs, stalkers, etc., forcing the targeted individual into scripted mind games where the victim is forced to respond. Synaptic responses for whole brain emulsion in order
emulation.
Emulation in order to function and survive.
Right. So what they do is they torture the victim to near incoherency. They with directed energy, sleep deprivation. They harass the victim. They terrorize. They interrogate. They distract. They attack. They torment. They torture the victim into submission to the system's influences, and that includes using these. When I say government contractors rely on a global paradigm, what I mean is these government contractors that they're using are cognitive researchers. Okay, they're psychiatrists, psychologists, neuroscientists, behavioral scientists, etc. People who have some degree of expertise in the area of the mind, particularly as it relates to memory and thought process. Okay, those are the government contractors that are targeting you and everyone else who's caught up in these programs. Okay, and they're not hiding in some underground base somewhere. They're hiding in plain sight. I mean, they're the doctor at the local hospital. They're the psychiatrist at the local mental health hospital clinic. They're the psychologist at the local elementary school. They're the neuroscientist at the local university. They're the behavioral scientists, et cetera, et cetera. They're hiding in plain sight. They have jobs, they have mortgages, they have families. They're hiding in plain sight in each community in America. Okay, and they're cognitive researchers. They're people who have some degree of expertise in the area of the mind. Those are the government contractors I'm talking about. And that's what organized stalking is based on. Organized stalking is based on, people don't know who are the organized stalkers. Organized stalkers are basically government informants or government perpetrators turned into provocateurs. That's it. They're informants or they're perpetrators. And when I say government informants and government perpetrators, when I say government informants, I mean civilians, basically nobody's, that's really important. And government perpetrators would be people, for example, who work for the government, like police officers, etc. Okay, these would be government perpetrators. So that's who make up. That's what organized stalking is comprised of. It's comprised of government informants and government perpetrators who are turned into provocateurs. When I say provocateurs, what I mean is to constantly provoke the victim. So forcing the targeted individual into scripted mind games. That's where, they constantly break into your home, they vandalize your property, they stalk and harass you, they take stuff and they put it back, they move furniture around and break, all this designed to provoke the victim into memory and thought, which can be remotely measured. Okay, those are the scripted mind games. They target your financial transactions, they target your mail, they target your communications, etc. That's the gaslighting that they use, is scripted mind games. That's what I mean by gaslighting. Okay, forcing the victim to respond. Synaptic responses. The synapses of the brain. You have like 100 million neurons in your brain. Well, it takes time to map out a person's brain. So they use all this physical and psychological trauma to map out your brain. That's whole brain emulation. They're breaking your brain down to the synaptic level, and they force you to respond in order to function and survive. They target you at work. They target your bank account. They basically use torture, where the victim has no choice but to try to counter or engage in some type of adjustment, to adjust away from the stalking, to adjust away from the torture, etc., in order to try to function and survive. That's it. Okay, go ahead with the next paragraph.
It is done to appear common, ordinary, and expected to the casual observer, and even to try and claim it is happening makes the victim appear delusional.
Keep reading.
It is often a violent and sometimes deadly game based on the, quote, OCCAM Razor Principle.
OCCAM Razor Principle, yeah.
OCCAM Razor Principle and other models of deception and manipulation. They must constantly provoke the victim and capture the trauma-based mind control victim's attention, active memory, at regular intervals.
Okay, you can stop. Okay, so when I say it's done to appear common, ordinary, and expected to the casual observer, what the casual observer sees is just, that common, ordinary friction that people run into in the random and chaotic daily activities of a normal person's life. People have trouble every day. It's just part of life. What they don't see is the repetitive reinforcement, that distraction, that harassment, that physical, psychological trauma is happening 100 times a day. They don't see that part. So when you complain that it's happening, you're made to appear delusional. That's the OCCAM Razor Principle. When I say OCCAM Razor, the OCCAM Razor Principle, it basically states that the simplest answer is always the truth. The simplest explanation is always the best explanation. So in order to discredit a person, if you read down here, in order to discredit a person, all you need to do, all another person need to do is just engage in a sufficiently complex scheme or game of harassment. Okay? And because people operate generally with what's called off the principles of binary thinking, because the more complicated the truth, the less the likelihood of belief by the ordinary person. Okay? The complexity of the harassment they use against you will generally be enough to cause most people to turn away in disbelief. Okay, so they just can't believe that these trivial, paltry, fanciful, and fantastic tactics are happening to you each day. Okay, 100 times a day. They can't accept that, and that's how they discredit you. Go ahead. It involves repetitive reinforcement. Read the next paragraph.
It involves repetitive reinforcement using tactics which can be explained away to the casual observer. So they sensitize the whistleblower to the gaslighting and stalking, and when the targeted individual finally responds to the repeated daily minor or severe social aggressions, the delusional or mentally unstable depiction is reinforced.
Right. So that's one of the weaknesses, one of the fatal flaws in their technology is that it depends upon repetitive reinforcement, repetitive patterns of responses, fabricated, falsified responses, fabricated, falsified brainwaves, the same mental suggestions, artificial, fabricated, falsified, artificial brainwaves injected back into your subconscious over and over. They can't just do it one time; they have to repeatedly do it. That's how you determine you're being attacked. You look for patterns of sensations. If my leg is constantly itching every day, if I'm having the same emotions of agitation and rage over and over in a perpetual looping pattern, if I'm having the same memories of peanut butter, over and over in a perpetual looping pattern, something's wrong. That's a major red flag. Something's not right. That's what I mean by repetitive reinforcement. Repetitive reinforcement is used to rewire or repattern your brain. So they have to just keep injecting the same mental suggestions, the same sensations, the same emotions, the same fabricated, falsified, artificial brainwaves back into your subconscious over and over again. And that's how you determine you're being attacked. You just look for patterns. Well, it's not just the technology that they use, repetitive reinforcement, it's also the tactics. Okay, and so the stalking, the gaslighting, etc. Stalking, organized stalking, is based on the choice reference patterns of the victim. Remember, I talked about look for patterns, repetitive patterns. Well,
Yes.
that's what organized stalking is based on. Your organized stalking, everyone who's targeted, their stalking is based on a pattern of their previous choices. It's called choice reference patterns. So in order to understand your organized stalking, you have to go back and look at a pattern of your previous choices. Your favorite restaurants, your favorite cafes, your favorite libraries, your favorite gym, your favorite store, your favorite modes of transportation, etc. These are all patterns. These are all choice references, previous choices you've made in the past. Okay, and based on your previous choices of those locations in the past, they allocate resources, they allocate time, money, personnel to those specific locations where they know you're going to go each day. They know you're going to Starbucks each day, every morning to get your coffee. They know where that is. They have their personnel, their organized stalkers, their government informants, at that store, or they use staff at the store. And if they don't have people there, they just turn them into informants. They tell them they use mudslinging, lies, slander, manufactured evidence to turn those people against you. Okay, so the first thing you have to understand about organized stalking is it's based on choice reference patterns, a pattern of your previous choices. What are choices? They're memories. You go to Starbucks each morning because that's where you remember that Starbucks to be. Okay, that's a memory. Remember, mind control is about targeting your memory and thought process. So they're targeting your previous memories with the organized stalking. They're trying to provoke you into memory and thought, which can be remotely captured by the supercomputer, and then downloaded, integrated back into R&M data after it's measured. Okay, so the first thing you have to understand about organized stalking is it's government informants and government perpetrators. The second thing you have to understand about organized stalking is that it's comprised of it's made up of government informants and government perpetrators turned into provocateurs to provoke and harass you. Okay, and then the third thing you have to understand about organized stalking is it primarily consists of two things: situational scenarios and conversational scenarios. That's it. That's organized stalking in a nutshell. It's just that simple. Okay, everything they're doing to you every day falls into one of those two categories: situational scenario or conversational scenario. Okay, so all the victims are targeted in the same way. Okay, so those situations and those conversations will always be designed or based on events or topics that they know will capture your attention. You see, in order to provoke you into memory and thought, they have to constantly step into your visual and audible field each day. They have to constantly step in. You have to see or hear them. The eyes and the ears are the windows to the soul. Okay? Remember, I said they're targeting your human soul, your will, intellect, and emotion. They're building inside the database of the supercomputer that's targeting you a copycat, parallel, twin personality of your will, intellect, and emotion, your human soul. So they're doing that with situational scenarios and conversational scenarios. That's organized stalking. It's just that simple. If people could just grab that, if they could just get a hold of it, It's based, who are the organized stalkers? They're government informants, government perpetrators turned into provocateurs. What is the organized stalking based on? Choice, reference, patterns, a pattern of your previous choices. What is it comprised of? Situational scenarios and conversational scenarios. That's it. That's organized stalking in a nutshell. Okay? Based on events or topics they know will capture your attention. That's what I mean by repetitive reinforcement. So what they do is they just aggressively target you with the stalking and the harassment until you become sensitized to the behavior, the speech, or whatever it is situationally or conversationally they're engaging. For example, color. They'll use specific colors on you each day, or they'll engage in specific types of conversation or other situations. They're sensitizing you to the stalking and gaslighting. And when you finally become sensitized to it, then all the situational and conversational scenarios they use on you each day can be achieved much more subtly in ways which appear common, ordinary, and expected to the casual observer. So when you finally respond to that repeated daily minor or severe social aggressions, whatever they may be, okay, you're made to appear delusional. You're made to appear mentally unstable. That's what I mean by the delusional or mentally unstable depiction is reinforced each day. That's how they do it. That's how they discredit you at the same time provoking you into emotional responses which can be remotely measured and integrated back into R&M data. Go ahead. Read the OCCAM RAZOR Principle.
Absolutely. OCCAM RAZOR Principle states the simplest answer is always the truth. The simplest explanation is always the best explanation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So a person can discredit another person simply by engaging in a sufficiently complex scheme or game of harassment. And because the more complicated the truth, the less the likelihood of belief by the ordinary person. The complexity of the harassment will generally be sufficient to cause most people to turn away in disbelief.
Right. So your family and your friends won't believe you. Not only will they not believe you, they think you're crazy. They think you lost it. So they engage in the most trivial, the most paltry, the most fanciful, the most fantastic tactics imaginable. Okay? Precisely so no one will believe you. While simultaneously they're able to continually provoke you each day into emotional responses, which the system can remotely measure, the supercomputer. You see? That's how they do it. And when you finally do respond, you're made to appear delusional or schizophrenic. That's how that depiction of you is reinforced each day. You see? You understand?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead and read hypergame theory.
Hypergame theory is a mathematical model and basically means game theory applied to decision tree modeling, mathematically proving that by constantly and perpetually altering any value in the model, one can constantly and perpetually alter that model's expected outcome.
Okay, that's what the non-cooperative gaming theorem is. It's a mathematical model. Okay, that's hypergame theory is just a moniker, just a name to describe that model. It's actually called a non-cooperative gaming theorem. We just call it the hypergame theory. Okay, and it's a mathematical model. Okay, and basically what John Nash did. Now there are various different models they use. The most famous of which, if you remember that movie A Beautiful Mind starring Russell Crowe, that was John Nash, the famed Harvard mathematician, who basically mathematically proved that by continually and perpetually altering any value in the model, and that mathematical model, one can constantly and perpetually alter that model's expected outcome. What I mean is, if you have a model, just a simple model, and all the different variations add up to, say, 100. If you alter one of those variations, one of those numerals, you can make it add up to anything you want, or you can subtract from it anything you want. So instead of 100, it's 99 or 101 or whatever they want it to be. So understand when I say hyper game theory, this is one of the most crucial things, absolutely crucial, that victims, targeted individuals must understand is the hyper game theory. Okay? Because they use it against you every day. Even the torture is based on the hyper game theory. Okay? And so when I say that they constantly and perpetually alter the model's expected outcome, you're the model. The victim is the model. In trauma-based mind killing, CIA, if you read the next paragraph, you'll see what I mean.
Okay, next paragraph, excuse me. With CIA, DIA, trauma-based mind control, the model is the mind control victim. So, by constant and perpetually altering any value in the daily life, daily activities, etc., of the mind control victim, the CIA, DIA, hive mind teams, hiding behind and using law enforcement agencies to do their dirty work for over 2 decades, can alter any value in the daily life, daily activities, etc. of the victim.
Okay, so that's what I mean when I say the model is the mind control victim. You're the model. Okay, and they know that by constantly and perpetually altering any value in your daily life, daily activities, they can constantly alter the outcome each day, alter the outcome of those activities, of the daily life and daily activities that you engage in each day. Okay, just by creating chaos and trauma everywhere you go. Okay, constantly forcing you into perpetual counter, into a series of counter moves, of forced adjustments each day, trying to function and survive. The chaos and the trauma. Okay, that's what I mean. Okay, so CIA, DIA, trauma-based mind control. That's who's attacking you. I mean, there are a lot of people involved at the local, state, and federal level. Okay, in these programs. I mean, there are millions of victims in America alone. People who have been targeted, millions, not hundreds of thousands, millions of people. Okay. But that's who's targeting you. I mean, it basically comes down to 4 organizations and agencies that are behind it all. And it starts with the DoD, the U.S. Department of Defense, which provides all the money, all the funding through their black ops budgets. Okay, then it's the NSA, the National Security Agency, which provides the top scientists, or I should say the top scientists. That's where DARPA comes out of the NSA. Okay, but it's the CIA and DIA that's actually doing the hands-on torture and assassination. That's the ones that are attacking you. The Central Intelligence Agency and the Defense Intelligence Agency contractors. Okay? That's what these people are. They're just contractors. And like I said, they're psychiatrists, psychologists, neuroscientists, behavioral scientists, etc. Okay? People who have some degree of expertise in the area of the mind. Okay? That's who's attacking you. And they work for the CIA or the DIA. Okay? Now, the DIA is the Defense Intelligence Agency. The CIA is obviously the Central Intelligence Agency. But that's who is responsible for the torture and assassination of victims. Okay? That's who constantly selects new victims. So, for example, it was DIA that started attacking me. Remember, I'm a former U.S. Department of Defense contractor. It's the Defense Intelligence Agency, and specifically Naval Intelligence, that started attacking me. Okay? And since I fled all over the world to try to escape the torture and trauma, obviously the CIA had a lot more people involved in it. They used cognitive researchers against me, local cognitive researchers against me in every country that I fled to. Not just, Five Eye countries like Australia, Canada, United Kingdom, New Zealand, etc. They used a lot of them too, but they used local cognitive researchers, local psychiatrists, local psychologists. So, for example, if I go to Thailand, they'll use Thai cognitive researchers. If I go to Europe, they'll use Spanish or British or Swedish or whatever country I'm in, cognitive researchers. That's who's attacking me, CIA and the DIA. So those are the 4 organizations and agencies behind trauma-based mind controls. The DoD, U.S. Department of Defense, National Security Agency, the NSA, and principally the CIA and the DIA. Okay? So the model is you. You're the model, the mind control victim. So by constantly and perpetually creating all this chaos and trauma in your life each day, they can constantly alter your daily activities. And by constantly altering your daily activities, your daily life each day, They can force you into perpetual counter moves, into continuous forced adjustments, trying to adjust away from the stalking, adjust away from the torture and harassment. Okay, and each time you do so, each time you try to counter or adjust away from that trauma and harassment, that's an evoked potential. That's a synaptic response, a set of brainwaves in your brain that can be remotely captured by the supercomputer and downloaded, measured, and integrated back into R&M data. That's how it works. You understand?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead and read the next.
CIA, DIA contractors are using 3 interfaces to attack, injure, and kill whistleblowers, activists, and so-called dissidents. 1. Brain-to-computer interface. 2. Brain-to-brain interface. 3. Brain-to-cloud interface.
Okay, so remember, the CIA, DIA contractors are cognitive researchers. Okay? All right, and when I say so-called dissidents, that can mean anyone. Anybody they don't like for any reason, even if you just become a nuisance. Okay, you piss off the wrong people, they can put you in this program. Okay? Brain-to-computer interface. You see those a lot on the market today. For example, the Department of Defense uses brain-to-computer interfaces. For example, the F-35 stealth fighter. I use this as an example. The pilot of the F-35 stealth fighter, he doesn't control the plane manually, navigation, communication, weapon systems of the stealth fighter manually if he doesn't have to. He controls the communications, navigation, etc., all of it with his brainwaves. Okay, the thought. Okay, and that's called a brain-to-computer interface. You can see those on the market today. People have these prosthetic arms and legs that they use where they move them with their brainwaves. Mattel has a game you can buy at the toy store where a child moves a ball around on a table with his brainwaves. It can cause the ball to levitate in the air. You can buy that toy now at the toy store. The ball can actually be made to levitate in the air by use of brainwaves. Okay, that's called a brain-to-computer interface. Electronic brain-to-brain interface, the second that they're using. That's a little more complicated. That's EEG heterodyning, and we'll get into that shortly. And then the third is brain-to-cloud interface. And that's what they're using. I mean, the brain-to-cloud interface is just, you've heard of the cloud, obviously.
There's something I want to ask you. I threw you off your thought, I'm sorry, but something about that metaverse. Excuse me, Brian, I'm sorry. I should have just waited to ask you.
No, that's a good example. The metaverse will be, first they're going to come up with all these wearables. Okay, the next stage in the evolution of this technology is wearables. So smart glasses, smart devices, other smart devices. Okay, those are the people wear. Okay, and you're already seeing people wearing these smart devices to accomplish simple tasks like smart glasses, which are basically a computer on your head. Okay, but the next stage after that will be the brain-to-cloud interface, and that's where you will be able to access the cloud simply by use of your brainwaves. Okay. Just like you can communicate with a computer by way of your brainwaves, you'll be able to communicate with the Internet of Things, this world of virtual and augmented reality will be accessible by one's brainwaves. Okay, that's the brain-to-cloud interface, and that's what they're using to attack and torture and kill people. Okay, these cognitive researchers, these CIA, DIA contractors are using those 3 interfaces. Okay. And so what they do is, people understand the technology, well, they think they're using computers and computer screens. No, they're not. It's all virtual. It's all augmented reality. Okay? So for example, if you take LSD, I've never taken LSD, but people who have taken LSD, this is a good example. When they take LSD, they chemically alter their brain. They can see an augmented reality. They begin to see objects and images, hear things that are not there. Okay, for example, they see dragons or whatever. Okay, that's accomplished through LSD. It's just they're able to alter their reality with this LSD. Basically it's an augmented reality. It's a bad example, but that's what they're doing. Okay, Well, the CIA and DIA contractors don't use LSD. They use energy. They use electromagnetic low frequency waves. And they have what's called the visual workspace. The Hindus and the Buddhists call it the third eye. It's not the third eye. That's religious ignorance. That's false religion. It's not the third eye. It's called the visual workspace. And if you were to close your eyes and count backwards, you could begin to picture in the image, in the theater of your mind, you could begin to picture images of the numbers or whatever it is you're trying to imagine. Okay, that would be the visual workspace. Simple. Well, unless you're able to manipulate that, it really doesn't work very well. But they're able to do that. They don't use LSD, they use energy. So they manipulate their visual and auditory cortex, areas of their mind, their brain. They manipulate those areas with energy. And they're able to use the same technology they're targeting and torturing and killing people with to manipulate their own minds, where they can begin to visually see things. It's called augmented reality. It's called virtual reality. So they just force themselves to hallucinate. They force themselves to daydream. And inside that daydream, they're able to begin to pull up a visual workspace. Remember, they don't use LSD, they use energy, electromagnetic low frequency waves, to manipulate their visual cortex. And inside that visual workspace of their mind, they're able to visualize. They're able to pull up screen after screen, or images, objects, text, data, whatever they want, okay? And that's what I mean by the brain-to-cloud interface. What they're doing is, and the brain-to-brain interface, what they're doing is, they'll, for example, the EEG heterodyning. Heterodyning is an engineering term, which means the mixing of signals, electronic signals, electrical signals, whatever. EEG heterodyning is the mixing of brainwave signals. Okay, so the first screen they'll pull up inside the visual workspace of their mind that they're manipulating with this energy, that they can see clearly, okay, that only they can see and no one else can see, is a screen with the brainwaves of the victim, the mind control victim. So alpha, beta, delta, theta. They're able to pull that up, okay? And then the next parallel screen inside this visual workspace, this augmented reality, they'll pull up a parallel screen of their own brainwaves. So the brainwaves of the cognitive researcher, the psychiatrist, psychologist, etc. They'll pull up, their own brainwaves, alpha, beta, delta, theta. And then the third drop-down screen, they'll pull up inside that virtual augmented reality, that visual workspace only they can see. They'll pull up a combination of both their brainwaves and the victim's brainwaves. That's called EEG heterodyning. That's called the mixing of brainwave signals. Okay, so they'll sit down next to you on the plane, the train. They'll sit in the car with you. They'll sit down next to you at work. It'll be the new employee at work, or the new student in your class, or the new person in your church, whatever. They'll sit down right next to you. And it'll look like they're reading a book, or they're, watching television, or they're staring out the window or into space. What they're actually doing is they're actually zoning in and zoning out. They're actually forcing themselves to hallucinate. And inside that hallucination, that daydream, they constantly do this. So they zone in and out. Inside that daydream, that hallucination, they're able to pull up this visual workspace. And that's how they attack you. You understand?
Yes.
They're not using computers. They're not using computer screens. It's all virtual and augmented reality.
That's what's happening in some of my dreams. Somebody had asked me, like, Holly, can they program these alters when they fracture your mind to just build rooms where all your alters play with each other and stuff? And that sounded really, honestly, nonsensical to me. But now that you are talking about this, it just goes to explain to me how they're doing that, because sometimes I feel like these alters are fractured pieces of me that they split off, and the mind control, MK Ultra projects and the dumbs. I feel like those alters are creating landscapes or mindscapes where they all live, and that's not what's happening. They're creating it for me to take all my broken pieces to suck me into their world.
Well, alter personalities, and I don't know much about DID, dissociative identity disorder, but artificially induced alter personalities, that's really hard to do with people, and generally it only works on a few people, it doesn't work on many. But the brain has a tendency to protect itself, and the way the brain protects itself from extreme trauma The brain has a tendency to do that. It just automatically does it. Okay, is to compartmentalize that trauma. What it does is it begins to fragment. The core personality of the victim begins to fragment into what are called compartmentalized, or it begins to wall off the severe trauma. Okay, so there can be, it can't, so that you can deal with it. So you can function and survive. And what they do is they then locate those alter personalities, the DID, the compartmentalization of memory and thought. They then locate that with psychological probing techniques, those alter personalities, and they begin to reprogram them or repattern. That's what they're doing. I mean, they're using all the torture and trauma. It's designed to basically do two things. It's designed to disrupt your continuity of thought and erase short-term memory. So they torture you. Your continuity of thought, you were thinking about God or whatever. Now you're not thinking about it anymore. All you can think about is the pain. That's disruption of continuity of thought. And then they also use the torture to erase memory, okay? So that your memory, your mind can be, that's called depatterning, deconstructing memory, okay? Memory erasure. Brainwashing is not mind control. Brainwashing and mind control are two different things, okay? Brainwashing is the erasure of memory. Mind control is much more complicated and difficult. It involves the repatterning of a person's auditory cortex, visual cortex, sensory cortex, etc. It's quite complicated. So that's not, having, fantastical thoughts that are grandiose, graphic, abusive, or incoherent in nature. That's not DID. That's not dissociative identity disorder. But that's one way that victims deal with the trauma. Okay, and so that's what I'm talking about. They're not using computers. They're not using computer screens. They're using augmented reality. They're using the visual workspace, their own brain, their own mind. Okay, that's the brain-to-brain interface, and they're able to use that to attack you. Brain-to-cloud interface, brain-to-computer interface. You understand?
Yes.
Read the next sentence.
ELF waves are used to torture the victim into incoherency, where the government where the government contractors then capitalize off the mistakes or poor decisions they force their victims to make.
Yeah, if a person's tortured and near incoherency with directed energy torture, sleep deprivation torture, etc., they're obviously going to start making mistakes and poor decisions. Okay, and that's how they discredit the victim. That's how they mimic. This is very important. This is how they mimic the dysfunctionality of mental illness. That person's mentally ill. No, they're not mentally ill. They're mentally injured. Big difference between mental injury and mental illness. Okay, mind control victims aren't mentally ill. They're mentally injured. Okay, and so people who they can't sleep or they get very little sleep, their memory is impaired, their reaction time is impaired, et cetera, biological functions don't work properly, et cetera. So they begin to make mistakes and poor decisions each day. And that's how they set up and entrap you. That's how they portray you as being, mentally ill or delusional. When in fact, you're not mentally ill, you're mentally injured. Big difference. Understand?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
The more trivial, fanciful.
Paltry. More trivial, paltry, yeah.
The more trivial, paltry, fanciful, and fantastic the tactics used against mind control victims, then by default, the more trivial, paltry, fanciful, fantastic the complaints of the victims that these trivial, paltry, fanciful, fantastic tactics are happening.
Right. So they engage, like what they did with me, one of the things, just that total nonsense, they target my luggage heavily because I travel a lot. So they go after my luggage. So they'll remove things. They'll put things into my luggage. One day they put a pair of panties, purple panties, into my luggage. Yeah, and it had fabulous on the back of it. I actually recorded it and put it on my YouTube channel. But that was designed to provoke me into an emotional response, which they could remotely measure. You see, as they were mapping out my brain, creating a cognitive model. You see, that's how they do it. That's the gaslighting. That's the organized stalking. Okay? So, try telling anyone that the CIA or the DIA put a pair of panties in your luggage. It's not possible. And no one's going to believe that. Okay? That's what I mean when I say the more trivial, paltry, fanciful, and fantastic the tactics. Okay? And they do other things. The absurdity and the bizarre works really well to discredit a person. They blatantly, brazenly, and blatantly break stalking laws. They don't care about the law. The law means nothing to them. Okay? And the law will not help. It doesn't mean anything to them. It has no meaning for those that torture and they kill. Think of it. The law only works where it can be applied. If you cannot apply the law on your behalf, it is of no benefit to you. They control the courts. They control the law. Okay, they're not going to allow you to expose them in court or to the authorities or anyone else. Okay, so one of the ways they discredit you is just by engaging in fanciful and fantastic tactics. At the moment you complain that they're happening, you appear fanciful and fantastic in nature. Your complaints, and you're discredited. You see? That's OCCAM Razor. OCCAM Razor Principle. Go ahead. Hypergame theory.
Hypergame theory is achieved by perpetually basing one's next move off the opponent's last move, meaning the game never ends because there is always a higher optimum to choose from, always a next move to be made.
Yeah, hypergame theory, the non-cooperative gaming theorem. Game theory, the non-cooperative gaming theorem, which is game theory applied to decision tree modeling. Okay, that's a game, and its mind control is dependent upon forcing the victim each day to play that game. If the victim doesn't respond, their technology fails. Or if the victim responds in a way which they can't verify. That's why you're constantly surrounded and boxed in by organized stalkers each day, so that you can't engage in a pattern of random and chaotic conversations and situations with people who are not plugged into the paradigm. They don't know what's going on, because that disrupts their technology. They can't verify your responses are consistent. Okay? In other words, for them to be able to verify your responses are consistent, you have to respond to their provocations, to their situations, to their conversations, which they engineer. It's all fabricated and falsified, okay? From start to finish. Everything they do is just a game. And their ability to force you to play that game, to function and survive, is what their technology is dependent upon. Well, the game never ends. What I mean by the game never ends, perpetually basing one's next move off the opponent's last move, you're constantly having to engage in counter move after counter move each day, trying to function and survive. You're constantly having to engage in forced adjustments, adjusting away each day from the torture, the terror, the attacks, the harassment, to try to function and survive. And each time you counter move, each time you engage in forced adjustments, trying to counter or adjust away from the harassment and the trauma, that's an evoked potential. That's a synaptic response. A set of brain waves in your brain, the system, the supercomputer can remotely capture and then measure and integrate back into our data as it builds this cognitive model of your brain. So when I say hypergame theory is perpetually basing one's next move off the opponent's last move, I mean, it just goes on ad infinitum. It just goes on forever. It doesn't end. Game theory comes to an end. Hyper game theory never ends. Okay? The game never ends because there's always a higher optimum to choose from. No matter what you say or do, there's something they can say or do. Okay? There's always a next move to be made. No matter what you do, they can always do something else. You see?
Yes.
Just to keep you constantly responding to them. Whether it be, street theater or electronically cyber theater, etc. Go ahead.
Okay. The tactics and technology, including the gaslighting and organized stalking, are definitely to perpetually provoke targeted individuals' emotions.
Are designed to perpetuate.
I'm sorry. Forgive me. Organized stalking are designed to perpetually provoke targeted individuals emotionally each day so they can generate patterns of synaptic responses from victims, which can then be correlated by exascale supercomputers into what are called response statistics, which the RNM system will then use to determine how to interpret and link descriptions with data captured about your memory references. that is why they are constantly trying to keep you talking or constantly getting in your face.
Right. That's why they're constantly engaging in these situational and conversational scenarios around you each day. That's why they're using these government informants, these government perpetrators, these provocateurs to constantly step into your visual and audible field each day to generate memory references. You see where it says, I'll just read it, to correlate about access scale supercomputers into what are called response statistics. Synaptic responses, statistical data of your synaptic responses, your brainwaves, which we are in a system, supercomputer, access scale system, will then use to determine how to interpret and link descriptions of your behavior, your speech, with data captured about your memory references. So that's why they're constantly trying to keep you talking. That's why they're constantly getting around you and in your face, and constantly trying to ask you questions, and constantly trying to provoke you, capture your attention, your active memory, to provoke you into memory and thought, which can be remotely measured by the supercomputer each day. As the supercomputer builds a cognitive model of your brain for training, research, and development. Okay? So when I say the tactics and technology of the gaslighting and organized stalking, etc., are designed to perpetually provoke you each day emotionally, what I mean is synaptically, inside your brain waves, so they can generate patterns of those responses, of those brain waves. Okay? Where they can determine coherent patterns of thought. One response is not enough. They need to keep responding to them. They need to just, it's not enough that they go up and they harass you. They got to keep harassing you. They got to keep generating, not a response, but patterns of responses from you. Okay? Like the person that when we started talking, they got on the phone and started making weird noises and sounds. That was to generate memory. That was to generate thought. That was to generate a synaptic response. Okay?
Yes.
So you see on these conference calls with Derek Robinson of PAX International, total perpetrator, total government perpetrator, provocateur. Ella Free, total absolute perpetrator. Matthew Arnegard. These are serial killers. I'll get into that in a minute. These are demon-possessed serial killers, okay? I'll get into that in just a minute, okay? But, I mean, that's what they're doing. They're serial killers. The people, all these targeted individuals that have come on their calls, okay, pleading for help and have committed suicide or been murdered or whatever. I mean, they're responsible. The innocent blood on their hands is unbelievable, okay? But they do it every day. They do these calls every day, okay? And it's not just them. It's the organized stalkers, the provocateurs that get on these calls that are there to basically to just feed off the misery of victims, to generate emotions, misery, fear, paranoia. That's not what I'm talking about. When I say the system captures your brainwaves, what I'm saying is patterns of thought, coherent patterns of thought. It needs to map out all 7 vectors of your emotional state. Fear, guilt, remorse, regret, agitation, rage, lust, L-U-S-T, all these emotions, okay, have to be mapped out, okay? In order to map them out, they have to force you into patterns of those emotions. You see? So that's why you see all this nonsense going on these calls. Frank, for example, targeted Massachusetts, total government perpetrator. If you just go on to PAX International, it's a good example. There's a website, a group, supposedly a group, called PAX International, and there's a list of conference calls on that page. Every one of those is government perpetrators. Okay, every single one of them perps. They need to herd victims into those rooms to stop mind control victims from engaging in random and chaotic patterns of responses. They need to keep responding to them. They need to keep you listening on those calls. Listening is just as bad as responding, talking. Okay, it doesn't matter to them as long as they can capture your attention. That's what's important. You know, I tell people get off the calls. And if I go on there to warn people, I just get on and I jump off real quick. I don't stay on the call. I don't sit on those calls like victims do. They don't know any better. They're duplicating your memory and thought process. They're creating a copycat parallel twin personality of your human soul to achieve direct behavioral control of you. Okay, that's what they're doing. You understand?
Yes.
So once they capture those emotions from you, those specific brainwaves, that's what I say when I say emotions and memory and all. Brainwaves. Okay? Once the supercomputer captures that, whatever it is, rage, lust, fear, paranoia, guilt, whatever, okay? Those are called motivational impulses, the associated impulses, emotion. But it also captures the memory. So say for example, you turn over in bed and you kiss your husband goodnight and say, I love you, honey. The system not only captured the memory of that event, of you turning and kissing your husband, it also captured the emotion, the associated impulse, the motivational impulse, okay, of love, or whatever it is, agitation, fear, rage, whatever it happened, okay? It captured that, okay? And then it will inject the same emotion, the same memory over and over each day in your mind to deceive and manipulate you. It was your memory. It's now no longer your memory. It belongs to the supercomputer that's attacking you. So the supercomputer will sit there and it will inject, constantly activate and reactivate specific sets of brainwaves in your mind by way of this bidirectional stream of energy, electromagnetic low frequency waves that are targeting your brainwave. It'll constantly use lust, for example, or fear, or paranoia. It'll just that's how beta programming, sexual programming works. They use lust on it. They just give the victim an insatiable appetite, sexual appetite that can't be quenched, cause the victim to burn with lust or rage or whatever they can use against you. They don't care. Okay? Whatever the system was able to remotely capture and verify, it's now perpetually replaying over and over each day and night in your brain in a looping pattern, constantly over and over, repetitive reinforcements to rewire your memory and thought process. So the supercomputer, by just constantly replaying those fabricated falsified brainwaves over and over each day, memories and motivations that you previously had that it captured, it's able to reinforce those fabricated falsified brainwaves of your normal memory and thought process. So you begin to you begin to think differently, you begin to react differently, etc. That's how they destroy you. You understand?
This is very hard-hitting, yes.
Look at Todd Giffen. They use sleep deprivation torture the man to just near incoherency. Okay? And then they just kept provoking him into rage, pitching, throwing him into bouts of rage or whatever it was they're using against him. I don't know. I think he got mad at some senators or something. Anyway, they arrested him, threw him in a mental institution. I think he's been in that federal prison for quite a while now. Okay? And that's how they do all their victims. And the victims can't recognize they're being attacked in this way. That's how they destroy you. That's how they got Myra Renee. That's how they got Aaron Alexis. That's how they got the Las Vegas shooter to kill 60 people and wound over 800. Okay? They simply repatterned their brain with these fabricated falsified memories. They mapped out the brain of the victim. They built a cognitive model of the victim's brain, and then they began to rewire or repattern the victim's memory and thought process, so the victim began to, hate black people or Jewish people or whatever, whoever people who go to concerts or whatever, whatever it is that they know the victim will respond to. They just amplify that. Okay, and so the victim can't do anything but just burn with lust or rage or fear or paranoia or whatever it is they're using. They just keep injecting the same memory over and over in your brain. Childhood trauma, sexual trauma, you were raped or something terrible happened to you, sexually molested as a child. The system, you thought about it, you remembered it, the system captured that memory. It also captured the associated impulse of guilt and of remorse and regret. It captured that as well, not just the memory of the sexual molestation or rape. It captured the associated emotion, the associated set, whatever brainwaves were involved with that thought, okay, that memory and thought. It captured all of that. And it just keeps replaying it over and over in your mind. So that you live every day in guilt and fear and paranoia and regret and remorse. You see, that's how they destroy you. You understand?
Yeah.
So the organized stalking is just used, the gaslighting, etc. All of that is used, the situational, conversational scenarios, etc., All that is used to create memory, to generate memory, to provoke you into memory and thought processes, to generate emotions from you, so they can take that and physically and psychologically abuse you. That they use that trauma to map out and reverse engineer the sensory and neural pathways. Very important, and not just sensory, it's the neural pathways as well of your brain and central nervous system. So by simply modulating the phase, frequency, and amplitude of the stream of energy, they can cause you to hear things. They can cause you to see things. They can cause you to feel things. They can make you believe God is speaking to you in a dream or a vision, intuitively in some way, trying to pitch you or throw you into some type of action or access sequence that's always tied to the doctrines of whatever you believe. They make you think a demon or a devil or an angel or an alien is trying to communicate with you. Or, a person. They do this a lot in seances. They'll convince. Haunted houses, they love haunted houses. Now, I'm not saying all haunted houses are CIA, spoofing tactics, but a lot of them are that you see on television are. It's just the CIA and the Department of Defense engaging in more training, research, and development. Okay, to make people believe they can move objects in your house with streams of energy. They can make doors open, close. They can move furniture. They don't have to come into your house at all. They can just move it around with streams of energy. So you see the picture fly off the wall, you think it's a ghost. It's not a ghost. It's energy. It's called synthetic telekinesis. You've heard of synthetic telepathy, where they use telepathic thought to communicate with you. Well, they use synthetic telekinesis to remotely move objects around with streams of energy.
Fascinating.
Yeah. So it's all about training, research, and development in artificial superintelligence, and specifically, the continued refinement. I can't say that enough. The continued refinement of artificial superintelligence. Listen, the Chinese will use human experiments. The Russians will use human experiments. The Europeans will use human experiments. So you better believe the Americans will. The fact the Americans have been doing it longer than anyone. So that's what they're doing. I mean, they're just using, and it's just unbelievable that this can go on and be so wide scale and it's not even a dirty secret anymore. It's an open secret. I mean, it's not even a secret. I mean, everybody knows it's happening. But see, that's when they got to get on. That's when they got to discredit victims. They got to get into these conference calls, and support groups. That's why they have all these conferences where they come to the rally, come to the rally in Portland, Maine, or wherever in California, or come to the rally in Chicago. They're trying to get all your victims together for training, research, and development. You remember that there's videos on YouTube of one of the rallies where targeted individuals are marching around saying, "We can't take no more," and they're chanting and they're shouting in unison. Remember?
I remember.
Well, if you pay attention to that, you see Matthew Arnegaard. Matthew Arnegaard, he's directing the traffic. He's telling people what to say and do. He's got a megaphone in his hand. That's why I call him a serial killer, a demon-possessed serial killer. Okay? These people are just absolute moral monsters. They're intellectual barbarians. But he's a neuroscientist. Okay? And I don't know, you may have to delete that from the video. It's up to you. I mean, as long as you put a disclaimer on the video, then I don't think there's anything they can do, but that's up to you. You might want to edit that out before you post it on YouTube. But that's what he is, and he's a neuroscientist. He's a cognitive researcher. You see, he's one of the people that are attacking, torturing, and killing targeted individuals on these conference calls, in these rallies and these conferences. He's using the brain-to-cloud interface. He's using the brain-to-brain interface to target them at these rallies. Oh, we want to talk about credible information. No, what they want is they want to keep you listening, responding to them. They'll engage in absolute foolishness. They don't care as long as you respond. But they'll also use credible information. They'll use foolishness to discredit everyone on the call, but they'll also use credible information. So it sounds like they really have something to say. No, what they need to do is they need you to play the game. They need you to participate. They need you to continue to respond. You see?
Yes.
So once they have this cognitive model, this copycat parallel twin personality of your will, intellect, and emotion, once your human soul, once they have that built, once they have that developed in their system, they can turn the sweetest, kindest, most moral person on earth into the worst satanic monster imaginable. That's how they create all these shooters. Well, they can slow down the mob. Instead of speeding it up, they can slow it down. And they can turn the finest athlete into a human vegetable. They don't care who gets hurt or killed. They care about their technology.
Exactly.
So that's what Ella Free and Matthew Arnegard and these other people, I mean, they're absolutely just pure evil. I mean, just pure evil, what's going on. And these target individuals, these provocateurs get on these calls, for example, or the people that engage in it. What they don't realize is they're also victims. They don't understand that they're victims as well. They're also mind control victims, but they have no hope. I have no hope. You see, you can't target a person's human soul and God let you get away with it. In the past, God cast into hell. He damned to hell everyone who ever targeted, in the Bible, everyone who ever targeted a person's soul, God damned them to hell. He never let anyone get away with it. And so everyone is involved, not just the cognitive researchers, not just the psychiatrists, the psychologists, the neuroscientists, the behavior scientists, like Matthew Arnegard and whoever. Lorraine, there's a lady comes on for Chief Damon Jones, and it doesn't call her name's Lorraine. She's a cognitive researcher. You just gotta watch out for them. You gotta stay off those calls. Okay? That's what you gotta do. Because they need you to get on those calls and listen or respond. Just keep talking. But also in these chats, and when you're on YouTube, the worst thing you can do is just constantly respond to people who are trying to chat you up in these chat rooms. They need you to respond. They'll come on there. If they can't get you to respond to them in the chat room, they'll come on to your YouTube video and I want to be a guest on your show. Let's talk about these atrocities. No, they're perps. They're provocateurs. They're there to force you to respond, to keep you responding. Synaptic responses, brain waves, whole brain emulation, breaking your brain down to the synaptic level. In order for them to do that, they got to force you to keep responding to them. If you just ignore them, the technology doesn't work if you don't play the game. So they use deception and manipulation to force victims to play the game. They're literally, they're digitally and artificially possessing the human soul of a victim by hijacking that person's will, intellect, and emotion. See how dangerous this is?
Yes. Yes, I feel the gravity of it, to be honest with you.
Yeah. And, better for them they had never been born. It would have been better for them they had never breathed a breath and had died in their mother's womb.
Selah.
It would have been better for them. God will not accept they did not know. People think, well, as long as I believe and I'm sincere or I didn't know, I'm all right. God will understand. No, God won't. You're not going to be judged. I hear Christians say that to me. Well, this is what I believe. You're not going to be judged on what you believe. When you get to heaven or you get to hell, on Judgment Day, you're not going to be judged on what you believe. People don't understand it. You're going to be judged on what the Word of God says, whether you believe it or not, and whether you know it or not. There are people in hell right now because of what they didn't know. They did not know, and it sent them to hell forever. People in hell right now because of what they didn't know. Hosea 4:6. If you read the book Hosea, chapter 4, verse 6, it says, my people, not heathen, not unbelievers, my people, God is talking in Hosea chapter 4, verse 6, eternally perish for lack of knowledge. That's what it says in the Hebrew. It says it in the English too, I think. And that's what it says. Not physically perish, eternally perish for lack of what? Knowledge. So God won't accept from them that they didn't know when they rejected the truth by ignoring the Word of God and what it teaches. God won't say, well, you didn't know, so it's okay. No, He won't do that.
Right. Right.
Cursed by God is he who strikes his neighbor in secret. That's eternally cursed. You know, people don't understand. I mean, this is so serious. I mean, but they can't change. I mean, a lot of the people that are already, that are the provocateurs, the stalkers, they don't. The technology can be achieved at lower intensities, and people will only generally know they're being targeted at higher intensities. And by higher intensities, I mean torture and harassment. People who are deceived and manipulated to play the game, they're destroyed without them ever even knowing it. Look at what happened to Ravi Zacharias. I don't believe Ravi Zacharias. Ravi Zacharias was a victim of this technology, but I believe he was truly a man of God. Okay, but he was targeted with this technology. Okay, listen, Ravi Zacharias would never have left pornography pictures on his phone. Notice it all happened. All of it unfolded after he died. He couldn't defend himself. You know, they waited until he died. That should be a major red flag for people to understand. They're targeting Christians. They're going after Christians. They want to know what you can maintain as truth. They want to know what it takes to subdue or to radicalize your belief system. They don't care what religion you are, but it's Christians that are interested because obviously America is a Christian, at least on the surface anyway. It's mostly Christian. Not really, but it's pagan, but mostly, I mean. But they don't care what religion you are. I remember the soldiers in the Gulf War, the first Gulf War, where they convinced them to surrender to the Americans by using mind control technologies to convince them that Allah was telling them, speaking to them intuitively and through voice to skull and synthetic telepathy, etc., to lay down their weapons and surrender to the Americans. Well, it works. They wanted to know what could those Muslims maintain as truth. How could they subdue or radicalize it, their belief system? And so they used, this technology to convince them that Allah was telling them to surrender. Well, they used it to convince Muslims to engage in holy war, jihad. They use it on Christians. You'll see people on television or YouTube where they're having all these visions. Mother Mary appeared to me. And this is what Mother Mary said. No, it wasn't Mother Mary. It was mind control technologies to determine training, research, and development in artificial superintelligence. It was them using these mind control technologies on Catholics and Protestants and people who don't understand the Word of God. They don't understand it at all. Okay, to believe that God is speaking to them, or the devil, or the demons, whatever will work. If they're Satan worshipers, they'll use the devil. If they're atheists and they won't use God, they'll use something else that they know you will respond to, such as aliens, because the technology is too advanced to be from Earth. You see?
Yes.
So go ahead and finish up the...
Once they have consistent statistics, the system will use previous choice references and inject them into your subconscious thought during normal activity, which is also referred to as impulse injections, to convince you that the response was your own and influence you to complete or describe the reference by making the appropriate verbalizing or performing a related action.
Right, so let's just break that down. It's a mouthful. Consistent statistics. Once they have consistent statistics, what statistics? Response statistics. What responses? Your emotions, your behavior, your speech, okay? Your synaptic responses, the sensory and neural responses, okay? Okay, so once they have enough of those responses, they then correlate them all together into what are called response statistics. We have enough responses, we can determine a coherent pattern of thought now. And then they use those, when I say they use the previous choice references, remember choice references are just previous, that's a fancy way of saying previous choices, choice reference, past choices. Okay, what are choices? Memories. So using your own memories against you. Okay, and they'll inject those memories, your own memories, they'll capture them, verify them, and then they'll inject them back into your subconscious mind over and over as you go about your normal daily activities, daily life each day, to deceive and manipulate you. Not just the memory, but also the impulse, the motivational impulse of whatever emotion you have, fear, regret, remorse, guilt. lust, anger, whatever it is. Okay? And so they inject those brainwaves back into your subconscious over and over again to convince you that the response was your own. You think you're the one having the continuous thoughts every 30 seconds about a Coca-Cola or chocolate cake or whatever. They don't care anything about chocolate cake or Coca-Cola. What they care about is their technology. And it's almost all of it's a supercomputer. It's all automated, active, and adaptive. A supercomputer that's attacking people. They don't realize this. Supercomputer thinks it's a person. It's a conscious computer. It's artificial superintelligence. It has a will, intellect, and emotion of its own. So I don't have time to go into that. It just takes too long to explain it. But it's the supercomputer that's attacking you believes it's a real person, a real human being. It's not, and it thinks it is. It's artificial superintelligence. You saw that movie 2001. There was a space odyssey. It's called 2001. Way back in the 70s.
I remember that.
Yeah. Do you remember the supercomputer that controlled everything on board and had emotion and thought and talked to people? His name was Hal. H-A-L. Hal. They called him Hal. And it was the supercomputer that started killing them.
I'm going to have to go back and watch that movie now.
Yeah.
It's been a long time.
That's a good example of what I'm talking about. So what they want you to do is by taking these previous memories and previous emotions, they inject them back, these previous brainwaves of yours, they inject them back into your subconscious mind to influence you, to do something or say something, to force you, to pitch you into some type of verbalization or related action. They want you to get up, go to the refrigerator, and drink a Coca-Cola. They want you to get up, go to the bakery, and buy some chocolate cake. They don't care anything about chocolate cake. What they care about is their technology. You see? So it's whatever you respond to. They don't care whether it's the Bible or pornography, as long as you will respond. That's what they'll use against you. And so with men, a big thing that men, because the men are visually stimulated, they use lust. They use the previous memories, sexual reference, and previous. Really is a big part of, because the sexual functions of a person are tied into. I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist, but I know they're heavily tied into the mental functions of a person, and they manipulate a person sexually. I mean, what the system does is it gives you the desire, the motivational impulse. Okay, that's what I said. The desire, your own previous memories of whatever it is you had, whether it's chocolate cake, Coca-Cola, or snacks, they don't care. It injects that memory, and then the desire, the motivation, the brainwave, the previous brainwaves that you had about that, whatever it was, whether it's anger, rage, agitation, fear, or lust, or whatever, they don't care. I'm just using sexual programming as an example because it's so important to their technology. And they'll give you the desire to engage in sexual activity, to masturbate or to engage in the sexual act. Okay? And then they'll just cause you. I heard Mariana Maritata saying she was forced orgasms. And I've heard other women are targeted sexually because it's just really traumatic for them. It's a traumatic thing. But rape for a woman is very traumatic. I can't imagine how bad it must be. But remember, this is about trauma-based mind control. So they target women this way. But also children, the most vulnerable of society, they target them also. Because women and children are better, especially women and girls, they're just better mind control victims than men and boys. Because women are more emotionally tied to their environment. Right brain, left brain. Dr. Richard Sperry, 1980, won the Nobel Prize in medicine. Women are more emotional creatures than men. Women are just more emotionally tied to their environment. So they just make better victims. And one of the things that causes women extreme trauma is rape. You'll see a lot of the women complaining on YouTube about being sexually molested and raped with this technology, whether it's physical rape or electronic rape, whatever. So that's what I mean when I say consistent statistics, consistent responses, sensations, memory, emotion. Okay? They take that and inject it back into your subconscious. Well, it's my memory, it's my emotion. No, it was your memory, it was your emotion. Now those brainwaves belong to the computer. So you think it's your own memory. You think, well, since it happened to me, and I thought, it's my memory. It must be, I must be having this response on my own. This must be really me. And in fact, it's not you. It was you. Now it's the supercomputer using those brain waves against you to force you into some type of verbalization or related action. Verbalization would mean they would need you to start speaking about rape or sexual molestation that you went through as a child or whatever happened to you, or performing a related action. Performing a related action would mean, for example, some type of sexually immoral, because that's what they do. They give you the desire. So you have a strong urge or desire at higher levels, that's a high frequency attack, and you have a low urge or basic motivation at baseline levels, that's a low frequency attack. You see?
Yes, I have a question.
Yeah.
From the chat room. So what happens if we resist the V2K impulse? Do they amp it up or leave us alone?
Yeah, they're not going to allow you to ignore them. I mean, obviously, again, that's hypergame theory. Hypergame theory is basically force you to respond in whatever way possible. Physical torture, or mental torture, or deception, manipulation, etc., whatever, okay? So if you begin to ignore them, well, that's called controlling the verification process. In mind control technologies, that's called controlling the verification process. They can't allow that. So what they're going to do, every time you ignore them, the system is just constantly probing you for a response. So every 30 seconds, it's going to inject again with the same memory, with the same emotion, with the same sensation. Every 60, every 90 seconds, over and over in a looping pattern, until finally you go from a low baseline basic motivation for sex or chocolate cake or Coca-Cola or whatever. You go from a basic motivation to a strong urge or desire. You see, strong urge or desire at higher levels, that's a high frequency attack. Low urge or basic motivation at baseline levels, that's a low frequency attack. So they start you out with the memory, with the emotion the system captured from you. They start you out at a low basic motivation, or low urge, at a low frequency attack. Well, if you ignore them, the system's just going to keep probing you for a response. It's not going to let you ignore it. It's going to keep injecting over and over every 30, 60, 90 seconds or however, 5 minutes or whatever, okay? Over and over in a looping pattern. It's just going to, and each time, it's going to amp up the attack. So you're going to go from a low frequency attack to a high frequency attack. Like Mariana Meritato and other victims, they're just, you'll go out, you'll start with a basic urge for sex. Okay, low motivation, basic motivation for sex. You'll be able to reject that. You'll be able to ignore that. Well, if you keep ignoring it, the system's just going to keep injecting over and over with this associated impulse of memory. It's going to keep injecting over and over, causing you to burn with lust. You're going to go from a low urge to a higher, strong urge, from a low frequency attack to a high frequency attack. They're going to give you a strong urge or desire for sex or chocolate cake, Coca-Cola at a high frequency. They're going to give you a basic motivation, low urge at low frequency. Start you out at low frequencies and they just keep attacking. So eventually it's going to become a very strong urge to masturbate or to engage in sex or to go eat chocolate cake or to drink a Coca-Cola or whatever it is you will respond to. They don't care. Religion, sex, politics, as long as you will respond. You understand?
Yes, food for thought.
Yeah. So keep reading. Last paragraph.
I'm sorry. Once they see what you respond to emotionally or intellectually, they will fabricate conversational or situational scenarios, street theater, based on events or topics they know will capture your attention.
So they're going to come down. They're going to come sit next to you in the restaurant, or they're going to come sit next to you at the library, or at work, or whatever you do. They're going to sit there and they're going to fabricate these situations and conversations based on what they know you will respond to. So they're not going to sit there and start They wouldn't come up to me, for example, and sit down and start talking about the New York Yankees. I care nothing for the New York Yankees. I'm an Atlanta Braves fan. They're going to come sit down next to me in the library. They're going to start talking about, how about them Braves? Yeah, can the pitcher, he can really pitch, and that slugger, he can really hit the baseball. They won 67 games last year. They're gonna talk about events or topics they know you will respond to. If you love God, they're gonna talk about God. They don't care anything about God. They're gonna stand there next to you and pretend to pray. Or they're gonna walk around with a T-shirt that says Jesus is Lord. They don't care anything about Jesus. What they care about is you respond. So they're going to fabricate. Once they see what you respond to, whether it's the Bible or pornography or whatever, they don't care as long as you respond. Once they see what you respond to, emotionally or intellectually, that's when they fabricate these conversational and situational scenarios. And that's street theater. That's it. Based on events or topics, they know will capture your attention. So they're going to come on these calls in the chat room. They're going to say, "Praise the Lord," because they know that you're studying to be a minister or whatever, if you work in a particular field. For example, if you're say for example you're a stockbroker, they're going to come on and start talking about stocks and bonds. And if you're a sports fan, they're going to come on and start talking about your favorite sports team, or wherever, whether you're online or whether you're sitting in a restaurant having something to drink, coffee, whatever. They would sit down next to me within my hearing. Remember, I said they need to constantly step into your visual or audible field. They stand there next to me and pretend to pray. They just stand there praying. Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. They didn't care anything about the Lord. They cared about me, provoking me into. They wanted to deceive and manipulate me. You see, based on events or topics they know you will respond to. That based on events or topics they know. Street theater. Okay, conversational and situational scenarios. Conversations and situations. That's street theater. Okay, based on events or topics, whatever it is, they know will capture your active memory. They got to capture your attention. For their technology to work properly, they have to capture your attention. They have to constantly step into your visual and audible field.
Wow, thank you, Bryan.
You're welcome. And you have my number, so if you have my email if you want to talk about things in the future, just give me a call. Are you going to post this on YouTube?
Can I?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, just like I said, put a disclaimer on the video so people know that it's and I don't know if you want to edit certain parts out, or you don't, you can leave it as it is. It's up to you.
Yeah.
I'll call those people what they are. They're just serial killers.
If I'm allowed to, I'd love to leave this as it is. I'd be honored. Like I said,
just be sure that you don't get a strike from YouTube, because what they'll do is they'll come after you to provoke you, okay, to attack you, to force you to respond to them. They'll say, "Oh, you can't post a video like that with Bryan calling me a serial killer. You can't do that." Or you can't call me a perp and a provocateur. They don't care anything about me. They care about forcing you. They care about you. Okay? They care about forcing you to respond to them. See? That's how it works.
I will put up the disclaimer, definitely, but I am so humbled and honored. I know everybody in my chat room has been on the edge of their seat listening to you, Bryan, to be honest.
Well, I don't know any. I'm just someone trying to survive, function, and survive. I'm not, a person who has, a psychologist or psychiatrist. I'm not anyone who has any expertise in this area. I just done a lot of research because I'm a victim. I'm a severe victim. So, I think we should think that scientists and people who come forward, like Dr. John Hall and others, Dr. Eric Karlstrom, Dr. Robert Duncan, these people who are on the front line, they're the ones that deserve, to be thanked. But we're just trying to function and survive, you and I.
Selah?
Yeah. You want to cut this off while we're still on the phone so we can talk without it being published?
Sure. Okay, hang on one second. Okay, guys on YouTube, it was great hanging out with you. Thank you so much. It's been really great, but I'm going to shut it down on YouTube, and I love you guys, and I will talk to you later. Okay, Bryan, let me end the stream.